We're sitting out in the desert in the middle of an 800,000 acre park. There are no police around, there's no microwaves, there are no McDonald's, there are no big microwave ovens, and we have magnetic field meters and radar detectors and other things that aren't expensive, but that we have in our toolkit. And we're sitting there, and we'll see an object. It'll look like a flash bulb going off in space. It's just an object that turns on and turns off. And sometimes it'll move and turn on and turn off. And one time we had like 15 of them that were right above us doing this that we filmed. This actor actually came out with us near Palm Springs, and we did this. And then the detectors start talking. But they're making sounds that the people, if you contact the people who manufacture at the factory, go, they don't make these sounds. And they're actually doing trans-dimensional communication through the electronics. So forget the Arecibo telescopes and the SETI project spending hundreds of millions of dollars. You can go to Radio Shack, get a radar detector, a magnetic field meter, tri-field meter, and a couple other things, put that out, sit in meditative state, and then welcome them to come, and all kinds of things can start happening. And what is it? How do you interpret that, though? It becomes very intuitive. Because, and what we have found with some of our equipment, certain things will make certain tones. Like we have one radar detector we call Walter, because a man named Walter gave it to us. And it will do a certain type of beeping. It'll go beep, beep, beep 3 times, and only 3 times. Doesn't make the sound like you would with a cop car or a radar gun. Just when an object is about to appear. And then within moments, there'll be a sighting of an ET object. It'll beep, 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 and it means we are here. So you get into this flow, and they actually do what I call a trans-dimensional entrainment of the circuitry of your device. It gets customized after a period of weeks and months, years. And they really will communicate in ways that are quite mysterious, quite bizarre. People who come on these whole week-thing expeditions with me, they go, what the hell is going on? I said, well, just listen and interpret for yourself. But there is a pattern to it that evolves. So you have objects that can materialize, objects that can be quasi-materialized, that are like the cobalt blue object at that Air Force Base. You can have spherical objects that will have the entities in them. You can have an object that appears and then dematerializes, and then all you hear is some voices speaking. You take a photograph, and there's this guy waving at you. This is why it's WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic. And everyone is oriented towards very materialistic, linear, early 21st century manifestations, because that's what we want. And I'm saying, what a mistake. That's a huge mistake. Because what they're really wanting us to do is to understand their universe, their cosmos, and go partially into that. Because it's edifying. That's how you learn. You don't learn by having everything spoon-fed you at the level that you're already operating. Does this make sense? Hard lesson, because people are lazy. And humans tend to be kind of slovenly, mentally. It was a Yogananda that said it's the lack of spiritual adventuresomeness that keeps humanity back. So there's a sense of adventuresomeness and exploration, and these civilizations understand that we need to be kind of willing to step, while we're in this planet and in this dimension, step partially into their understanding of what it's like on their planet, where using thought to interface with an electronic device is as common a thing as we would be texting someone with our cell phones. But remember, a few hundred years ago in Salem, Massachusetts, if you had a smartphone, you'd be burned at the stake as a witch. It'd be witchcraft. It'd be magic. So that's why, if we're really looking at this, and instead of looking backward, if we want to look forward into where our civilization's headed, we need to take these lessons to heart and begin to practice it within that paradigm. And that's what we're encouraging people to do through these CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind teams. Very, very exciting, because as you begin, we have an app that's at the app stores. It's for both iPhones and also Google, that you can get that has the whole meditation technique. It'll actually turn your phone into a magnetic field meter. It does all this stuff. It's a whole course. It's a huge file. You have to use your computer to download it. It's so big. But I encourage people to get that. We have people who've done that, gotten that, and who are in all kinds of remote areas of the world. And now that's separate from the app, the free app that lets you network with people in your area. That's the ET Contact Networking app. This is the training app. But it's only like $6.99, and it has like a zillion things in there. And I encourage people to get that, because if you can't come on a whole week expedition with me, and those are limited to 20 people, so let's face it, not many people can, but you can get that, practice it, find some people in your area, and go out and begin to do it. And when you go out and begin to practice it, then you realize, wow, this works. And we've heard from so many people go out and try it, and they go, we had an amazing object, we had amazing sighting, we had this thing come right into the field with us. And the reason it works is that it's so simple. Because the simplicity of it, even though what I'm giving you is more of a deeper theoretical and physics understanding of it, everyone's conscious, right? Well, unless you're in a coma. And everyone can think. And so if you are sentient, if you have the ability to be aware and awake, you can become aware of awareness. And in that self-aware state, you can go into the silence of deep, quiet mind. And in that state, begin to remote view and see distant places, including where the ET craft are. And they may be under the ground underneath you. They may be transposed in the air around you. They may be on the far side of Saturn. It doesn't matter where they are, because there's no limitation in space when you go into thought consciousness that goes beyond space-time. So that's where the meditative state is so key. And if you begin to understand what's there's this wonderful saying from I think it's a Sufi tradition, thinkest thyself a puny form when within thee the universe is folded. It's a rhetorical question. So we think of ourselves as just these little animals running around, but the truth is, every conscious being has the ability to be aware of the awareness itself, and from that point, explore anywhere and travel anywhere, see any place. And human history is replete with people who've had these experiences, many times quite spontaneously. I think almost everyone has had. How many people here have had a precognitive or an intuitive experience of something that then happened in their life at some point? Yeah, I met my wife that way in a lucid dream. And I think that what you find, I really did. But what you find is that this is something that is innate to every human being. It's not like you have to be, this guy I knew for years, Ingo Swann. You know who Ingo Swann is? Very famous remote viewer, did a lot of stuff for the intelligence community, lived to regret it. But I was at his home up in New York some years ago, and just a wonderful man, brilliant. And he did a lot of work with SRI, Stanford Research International, and DARPA, and Army Intelligence and CIA. And they were experimenting and training people during the Cold War to be able to use consciousness to spy on the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was doing the same thing. And everyone in the intelligence community at a certain clearance level knows about this, by the way. This is nothing, all that secret. It's hidden in plain sight. But what was interesting to me was that, he regretted that he ended up being used that way eventually. But what he and I would talk about together is the fact that every single human being has the ability to do this. They just don't do anything to help develop it. So it's like, you don't start out in kindergarten doing quantitative analysis and calculus. There's a process, right? It's the same thing with these capabilities. I bench press 410 pounds. But you don't start out that way. You rip your pectoralis muscles in half. So so everything is an iterative learning, developing process of skill and knowledge and experience that builds on itself over time. Most people just never take the time to sit down 2-3 times a day, go into a quiet meditative state, and then practice the ability to intend to know. And I call it the intend to know because it's not brute will, it's quietly going into consciousness and then saying, I want to know this, or I want to see this place. And let it open very subtly. It's a very subtle, integrative process as opposed to a brutal intellectual one. My own approach to this is a very Vedic one. And as you know, the ancient Vedas, people conflate the Vedas with Hinduism. They have really very little to do with each other. The Vedic knowledge predates any known, it's a philosophy. But Vedanta is really the study of the consciousness in its singularity. And that's, of course, from that, the concept of the human experiencing that state, which is called samadhi or nirvana. But there's this misunderstanding in the public that only certain adepts, that you have to lay on a bed of nails for 30 years and, do all kinds of crazy stuff to be able to have this happen. It simply isn't true. Every single human being can learn to sit quietly, go into a meditative state, using whatever works for you. I use a type of mantra meditation. It can also be a breathing technique with mantra. There are a lot of approaches to it. The key thing is for the mind to become quiet, centered, and allow it to become very deeply centered. And at the point where all thought and awareness of everything disappears, but you're not asleep, you're still awake, it may just be a flash. That's the samadhi state. It's the experience of pure consciousness without differentiation. That's the state of pure non-locality. At that point, you are omnipresent. You're everywhere. And it is at that point that if you begin to practice and experience that, you can stay very steady state in your awareness and then intend, while still being very